sec while we get our technical stuff together here.
I'm Gladys,
I'm Jeff.
and we're your hosts tonight.
Yes, welcome to Pan Theater.
We are so happy to have David Razowsky back. He hasn't been here for about a year, and he comes to Pam. He is just so wonderful to have back and to have here teaching. So David has worked as an actor, a teacher, a director, and our artistic director at Second City Hollywood. He's performed with Stephen Carell, Stephen Colbert, Amy Sedaris, and countless other improv legends. And he teaches the mythology, not only in the US, but all over the world. So let's give a big welcome to David. How are you?
So I also want to add that David has taught workshops at Pan many, many times over the last 10 or 15 years.
God, I don't know.
At least 10 years.
At least 10.
years.
When we were at the, what's it?
Closer to 15. Yeah,
Yeah, the first place that I remember is it was next to a hair salon.
yeah, that 2135.
Yeah,
Broadway.
where they
Yeah,
just
yeah.
played the loudest
Yes.
music all the time,
Yes.
and the
Yes.
room was really weird. That was weird. It was double. The room had
Yes, it was
set
a
up
strange room.
It was a strange room.
It
Yeah. So there.
Yeah.
So I have been here a lot, and
Yeah.
I work with you two a lot.
Yep.
Yes,
Great.
yes, yes.
Good night.
So you actually developed your methodology of teaching partly at Pan.
Yeah. One of the things that David Alger has done for the improv community is to bring in so many people to work with improvisers without an idea, like not having to match the agenda of a particular methodology or curriculum of a particular school. So what that does is it brings in a lot of different voices, a lot of different philosophies, methodologies. And I remember coming here soon after I've had like an epiphany of what is my methodology? What is the way that I teach? I remember working with a bunch of people, and there's certain phrases that people would come in comments to what I was doing, and I would go, oh my God, what you're saying is just so profound, and it became foundational for the work that I was doing. And one of them that I remembered, I can't remember who said it, maybe David said it, is once you define it, it exists. And I think that that's a major part of the philosophy that I have is once you define the emotions you have that you're working with, it exists. And once it exists, then you get to play with it. And an emotion is something that exists, that we have. Like I have an emotion to you, I have an emotion to you, I have an emotion to the space. And if we're basing our work on the emotion rather than what can we conjure up on stage and invent on stage, which isn't as deep a well as your emotional content. But once I wrap my head around, once you define it, it exists. It's like, oh, I just get to make things exist, and then people then I get to teach what I've just created in the existence world. It's really cool. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I mean, it's like being in the moment.
Yeah.
What you have, what you need to know is there.
Right.
And you just work on that. You don't have to worry about who am I, where am I. It's just being in the moment and looking at your partner and just taking one step at a time. And what I like, what you always say is, you get to know what do you say? And now I can't say it because I've never
You
said
will know
what
when
you
you
need to know when you need to know it.
Right. You will know what you need to know when you need to know it.
So you have to trust yourself and you have to trust your partner.
But what you also hit on, which I think is really cool, is the idea of everything you need, you have.
Right.
Everything that's there on stage, you have. Everything that anybody says, once you recognize that they said it or they feel it or they did it, then you can use that. If you go outside of the experiences that we're having, you're not really dealing with what's happening in that moment. So a lot of improvisers, I don't take suggestions. At the beginning of a scene, I won't take a who, what, and a where, because it's like the scene ends up being about that. What I notice is, how is my partner sitting? What's the emotional content that they have just by being there? what can I imprint upon them that is the feeling that they have in that moment? And if I do imprint that upon them, so if it looks like you're sad, it looks like you're curious right now. So if we start a scene and you have that look, my response is going to be, oh, you look curious, I'm taking that into my heart, and I'm going, what do I need to tell my friend who's curious? It's like, you're going to realize what you need to know later on. And that's the beginning line of a scene, as opposed to, I know, Jerry, that you came here for the bar mitzvah party, and Sid wasn't going to be around because he had to go to shul that day, and your sister's at the mikvah. It's like half the audience doesn't know what the fuck I'm talking about. And the other half's like, oi. But if we start out a scene where you are an empty vessel, or you are an empty vessel, and I'm giving you what you need to know in that moment based upon the physicality that we have, and we'll figure out where we are later, or who we are later, or what we're doing later. So, yeah.
And I think that carries on to your life outside of improv, because you become a better person of reading other people and what do they really, they say I love you, but the way they say I love you, maybe they don't love you.
Right.
And so you're able to, what you teach to get that emotion helps when you're out.
Absolutely. And one of the things about when I wrote the book, because this is a book that I wrote here. This is the only copy. I brought 4 more. One of the things about this book is half the book is, a quarter of the book, an eighth of the book, 34% of the book is memoir. Then there's philosophy. And the philosophy isn't just improv philosophy, it's life philosophy. So the concept of you will know what you need to know, and you need to know what you need to know. Boy, was that helpful on election day. And boy, is that helpful right now. Like, I will know what I need to know, but in the meantime, I get to replace ambition with gratitude, which is a huge thing to say. Replace ambition with gratitude. Especially right now, the moment that we are in, at this very moment, sitting in this room, being in community, taking it in, being creative, being with each other. And that's about, you will know what you need to know, and you need to know what you need to know. And here we are. And it's also feel the feelings you're feeling the moment you feel those feelings. That's a huge one right now too, for what we're going through, because you get to express the feelings that you have on stage. You get to express the feelings you have in life. You might want to tamp it down, but it's going to come out some other way. So it's that feeling of feel the feelings you're feeling the moment you feel those feelings. And what gets me about that, we're entering into a different part of discussion here, is most improv methodologies ask you not to have any kind of conflict. And so it's like, don't cause an argument, don't have conflict. And it's like, life is conflict. Any good play, movie that you're reading has a dynamic. It might not be called conflict. I don't call it conflict. I call it a dynamic. I'm happy, you're sad. I'm angry, you're happy. I'm angry, you're confused. I'm angry, you're elated. And when we have that dynamic, then we've got a scene. But if I'm happy and you're happy and I'm saying yes and to everything that you're doing, the scene just goes, it meanders somewhere because we're just in agreement with each other. And it's like, that's not fun. It's not fun. I mean, I've been reading a lot lately, trying to distract myself from I don't know what, just cause. And I've been reading a lot of books lately, and it started with a book about how come Hitler got into power, all the way up to some fantasy about dragons. And in each of these books, certainly the first one, there is a sense of dynamic, a sense of conflict, and every story that we have, every story that we love has conflict. Every story that we love starts out with somebody on a quest. And the quest is essentially, what makes this day different than any other day? What makes this day different than any other day? And because you're going to make me watch a scene that is the same scene as every other day, don't bother. If you're going to give me a scene that is the typical scene that we see at a restaurant, a first date, prom, don't bother. Just don't bother. So for me, a lot of the methodology that I have coming into the space is a bunch of actors who are willing to fail and willing to go, what do you got, Dave? What do you got? What do you got? And it's really a Chicago thing. I'm from Chicago. And one of the things about Chicago is people in Chicago will give you breaks. And if they watch a show and it's a horrible show, It's a horrible, horrible show. And somebody will come and go, that was horrible. Because that's how they talk. And you go, yeah, I know. And then they'll say this, which is cool. When's your next show? Because I'd like to see it. And that's the coolest, because it's like, this is the way that we did it. And I grew up there, and I grew up in the theater community there. So let's mess it up.
Mm-hmm. And it's the freedom of allowing yourself to mess up. And I think the way that when you don't have to worry about the who, what, and where, and it's all there, it's kind of like a freedom. I don't have to think about, in my head, it releases the thinking in my head, and I can just respond to your emotion, to your shape, to where the chair is, where you are, the distance, and that gives me all the information I need to know right now.
Right. All that you need to know, for sure. And all those, whatever it is that you don't have, you don't need. Whatever it is that you don't have, you don't need. And and again, it goes back to replace ambition with gratitude. You have everything that you need. And for those people who don't, you may not know, at the beginning of an improv scene, for the most part, you ask the audience, where are we? And they'll say, you're in a bakery. Who are they? It's like, there are two plumbers at a bakery. What are they doing? They're repairing a toilet. And then you go, you might as well ask, what's the first line of dialogue? And then what's the second line of dialogue? What surprising thing's gonna happen? It's like, can we just be together and be in flow? Just be in flow. And how do we get out? How do we not be in flow? Is by being mindful to know the moment that your brain kicks in and your ego starts to get involved. And I don't mean your ego in a Freudian way, I mean your ego in an Eckhart Tollean way, which is essentially that monkey voice in your head saying, don't do this, don't go there, don't do that, which stops the flow. And what we're here to do is we're living our life to be in flow. And to feel the feelings we're feeling the moment you feel those feelings, and to let those feelings, excuse the expression, it's a horrible expression, but I've just wrapped my head around it too much. It's creative metastasization. It's creative metastasizing. It's a horrible word, but it's the idea that you are creating something, and once you create something, then you can create something off of what you just created, and it just starts to build and build and build. It flows.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the scene, when the lights go out or somebody edits you then go, what happened? And the what happened isn't like that was horrible. The what happened was like, I had no idea what I was doing, and I just did it.
And I don't remember.
And I don't remember.
Yeah.
And it's really important to remember. Only because, so you can praise yourself. So you can say, I did a great job. Even if you just did a great job for 4 seconds. If you did a great job, that's all that matters. And if you were in flow for 4 seconds, you suddenly have this new neural pathway where it's like, I will never recreate that again, but I will recreate the ability to be in flow for 4 seconds.
And 4 seconds goes on to 5 seconds, and so
Right.
it's building blocks.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to know that you're on a journey, you're just on a journey, and you're gonna know, again, what you need to know. The worst thing that you can do when you're improvising is go, I know what the scene's about. Because the moment that you know what the scene's about, it's like
You're controlling.
You're controlling it.
Yeah.
You're controlling it. And my phrase is, just because you start a scene in a doctor's office doesn't mean at the end of the scene you can't be sacrificing a goat. Because it's really like that could happen.
Right.
That could happen. It's not like, well, we're going to sacrifice a goat in a doctor's office. It's like, we're in this doctor's office. And if you're in a flow, it can go to a goat sacrifice. I don't know.
Right.
And
that's a scene that you haven't seen in the doctor's office.
Exactly, because what we want to do is exactly that. We want to perform scenes that we've never seen before. We want to get into scenarios that we've never had before.
You want to go to places we've never been before.
Absolutely, and you also want to have that opportunity for that one day to see what those characters. So I started seeing, and right before I entered here, I feel this. I've been doing it for years, decades. Like I'm back there, and all I'm thinking of is, I cannot wait to find out what my character didn't know about themselves. I cannot wait to find out what my character didn't know about themselves. And what that is it opens you up to going, oh, that's the reason that I'm here. This is the reason we're doing this scene today. I cannot wait to find out what my partner didn't know about their character. I cannot wait to find out what my partner didn't know about my character. You know, and then we've got something where it's like both of us are going, what's happening? What's happening? I didn't have coffee today, so I don't know why I'm like this, but it's that feeling of like, this is the cool thing about theatrical improvisation that isn't like anything else, anything, and I don't even have a name for it. It's experiential or something like that. This is what it is. There is nothing that, this is so cool. There's nothing that two people can do together instead of making it negative. In improvisation, what we have is two people who are starting out a journey. Both of them have the exact lack of information that the other one has. And as they keep going through this journey, both of them at the same time are being educated about what it is that they're happening at that moment. So one actor doesn't have less information than the other actor until one of the actors starts getting like, uh-oh, what's going on? And then goes, oh, by the way. Like, no, don't oh, by the way me. Don't bring like, oh, by the way, your mom called. No, don't oh, by the way me. And don't, oh, I forgot to tell you. Don't fucking do that.
Yep.
Sit in it. If you don't know what's going on, that's a gift to the scene.
That's where you should be.
And that's where you should be. And you should recognize the fact, like, I don't know what's happening.
Yes.
And if you don't know what's happening, this is a great line for you to use. I don't know what's happening. Because then you're going, okay, all right, good.
And you're being in the moment. You're being authentic because you don't know what's happening.
Right.
Yes.
And you can't, because you can't get around this block of I don't know what's happening until you go, I don't know what's happening. And then then it goes away.
It.
And then it becomes to, what do you mean you don't know what's happening? It's like, I don't know what I'm doing here. It's like, you're here with me. It's like, oh, there's a scene you've never seen before. Right? I don't know what's happening. That's okay. But a lot of improv goes, you do. A lot of improv teachers goes, you do know what's happening. It's like, no, I don't. I don't know what's happening. It's like, well, then figure something out. It's like, that's not going to help. Anything that adds the addition of plot in any scene has never helped any scene. Because that plot comes in and you go, where am I going to put this? Oh, by the way.
It distracts you from the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what happened to all that? We were on a journey. It's like, I didn't want to pursue that. It's like, why not? Because I didn't know what to do. It's like, that's what you pursue.
And that's what you say, I don't know what to do.
I don't know what to do. And it helps in my life where I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer. So what are we going to do? We're going to wait. And we're going to figure it out somehow.
And it's being in that awkward kind of silent space that's where the answer comes up.
Absolutely.
And you just have to be like, you just have to listen and be conscious that, and trust, like, again, I go back to, you'll get to know what you need to know when you need to know it, and you have to just...
You just leave it alone.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that silence that you're talking about is that's an amazing amount of information in that silence. That silence gives you and your partner time, as long as the silence isn't, oh my God, the audience is staring at us, and what are we going to be like, how about something? And like the audience is with you going, what's happening? And very often, I remember in scenes where somebody says something and I have no idea what they're talking about, I'll just give this look like, like, wow, that was something to say, and it's really this, like, I got nothing. I don't know what to say. But we call it a pregnant pause for a reason. It's about to give birth to something. And
I like that.
And you don't want to cesarean the moment. There's a sentence that's never been said before.
Yeah.
You don't want to cesarean the moment. You know, you don't want to force birth the moment.
Violence to it.
What's that?
To do violence to it.
Or whatever, you know, because that moment, you don't know what's going to happen in that moment. So just sit in it. Sit in it. Like whenever I hear sit in it, I think about a TED Talk that I did. A TED Talk, like I did 4 of them. And the TED Talk is called The Product of Your Life is a Process of Your Life. And it's essentially a couple instances where it's like, I fucked up and I didn't know what to do. And it was just sit in it. And that information is going to come to you. It is going to come to you. It's when we short circuit it that we don't find what the real answer is. And we're not in the moment. Yeah. So
It's a kind of a Buddhist approach to improv.
yeah,
right?
yeah.
In a
Somebody,
way.
Jules Munns, who runs the, what's it called, and also theater company in England. He said he called me the angry Buddhist. And I was like, that's on brand. That's on brand. Yeah, but it is, and that Buddhist approach is. I remember being on my way many years ago, and just kind of being on my way to the Santa Cruz Improv Festival, and I was at LAX at a bookstore there, and I saw a book called Buddhism Plain and Simple by Steve Hagen, a Buddhist monk from the center of all Buddhist monks, the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And I read this book on the plane, and I'm like, this is the greatest improv book, not about improvisation, but clearly about improvisation. And because everything that he was saying, and I talk about in my book, about all the different things that were in that book that became foundational for my methodology. And that book was just, that book, and I read that book, and then I read Eckhart Tolle, and then, and all of these things, all of these different disciplines, I'm not going to call Buddhism religious, but all these different disciplines have become part of my improv life.
Right.
And there's a calmness to it, and there's a fun to it, and there's a joy to it, and there's a journey to it. And that journey is fantastic if you get out of your way. And that's such a hack phrase, to get out of your way. But another way of putting it is like, it becomes this beautiful journey if you just stay on the path, which is also a hack.
You allow the life that you're meant to be to happen instead of you forcing the life that you think you should have.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you keep going in the direction that you're faced. Whatever direction that you're faced in that scene in your life, you keep following through on that journey, on that path. Because you get off, it's like, oh, this isn't working, and going back to the metaphor, the simile, what it was like, it isn't working, so I better blaze a trail through this tundra. And you're like, why is this so hard? It's like, because you got off the fucking path, man. You were on the path. Well, it wasn't working for me. It's like patience.
And you've had quite the journey. I mean, from starting out at the Jewish Community Center at,
My mom.
mom just kind of said you're taking acting class,
Right,
and how
drama
that was
class.
the beginning of your journey, and how some doors, opened and then some closed, and then you just sat.
You sat in it.
Yeah.
I just sat in it, for sure.
And here you wrote your book.
And then I wrote that book, and I was not going to put the memoir portion in, and then I showed it to an author friend of mine, Mark Larson, who wrote this great book called Ensemble, the oral history of Chicago theater, and I just sent him the book. That was the second half of the book, just the methodology, and then as an afterthought, I sent him the first. He's like, oh, that first part. And I think a lot of people don't read that first part, and I get it, because the other part's like what you can really work on in your improv life. But the journey is, for me,
It's part of. Yeah.
it defines the methodology. It really defines the methodology. When I started in when I started in theater,
Mm-hmm.
So I started in theater in 1967. I was 8 or 9, and I was doing plays in 1967, 68, and I was the kid in the play, and we would do these theater games that later on I'm like, wait a minute, that was improv. And then I moved on from there, and then I got a degree in photojournalism. I was a photojournalist for a number of years, and I missed theater so much, and I went back to Chicago at a time where Chicago theater was blooming, and you would do whatever it is that you could do, and whatever it was that you can do. And I remember going to one audition and going, I'd just done a Shakespeare show, and I really loved it. It was really groundbreaking. I already did the Bacchae, and it was really, really fun. So I was 21 or 22, and I had this feeling like I could do anything. And I walked into an audition for a play, and I was like, I'm not going to do a typical audition piece. I'm going to do a Lawrence Ferlinghetti poem, Coney Island of the Mind, which is like, it has the word cock and balls in it. It's like, my God. And I finished it, and he went, why did you do that? And I'm like, because I want to do something different. And he goes, don't. But that guy gave my name to somebody that ran Geese Theater Company for prisons, and then I performed non-comedic improv in prisons and mask work, movement and mask work all across the United States. At the time, that was my introduction to improvisation. And no one, I'm sure I'm wrong, but there were maybe 3 improv theaters in the world at that time. And I left Geese Company after a year doing non-comedic improv, which was very theatrical and movement-based, and I had some dancing background, so it was like I came in and then I went in to do this thing, and somehow, I don't know how, I can't remember it, I signed up for classes at this place called Improv Olympic, this company called Improv Olympics at Cross Currents in Chicago, and I just happened to fall into Del Close's class as he was doing, working on the Herald. And I don't know, maybe you know what the Herald is, but the Herald is the iconic improv form structure that's taught. And when I learned it, I remember learning it, and I remember thinking, when I'm done with this, I'm never going to do another Herald again. But it taught you connection, listening, connection, listening, group mind. It taught you all those things. And little did I know that that started. I was on the second house team. And a house team, for those of you who don't know, is every theater has a house team that performs, and you want to get on a house team because then you get to perform. I was on the second house team. And when I say the second house team, I mean the second house team ever. They're like the second house team. And they're like, what? And it was a crazy time. It was just crazy. Yeah, I went off. I just went off.
Yeah, and then,
that's what I'm here for.
Splatter Theater and your Second City and all this.
Yeah.
Now,
but also so Splatter Theater came with a bunch of improvisers, came up with something called Splatter Theater. This guy, Mick Napier, came up with a concept. And the concept was this: let's improvise a splatter movie to get a script to create a show. And so he cast a bunch of his friends to create the show from nothing through improvisation. And that was in 1987. And it's going on for 35 years. 13 people killed on stage at one time. You start with a white set. And what we did was we started with a white set. Everybody had white clothes. And there were the murders were somebody had their tongue ripped off. A guy was impaled on a banister, and his stomach was opened up, and he was just entrails coming out. But the entrails were every week we had to go to a butcher and have him fill sausage casings with butterscotch pudding, and then we found a bladder so it's like pulling it out. And then at the end of the show, we have a cow's tongue that's ripped off of somebody's mouth and slammed on the ground, and we had a dog in the cast who would eat the tongue tartar. And
that's a show that I've never seen before.
But that's a show you've never seen. But here's the kicker: is that show? So it was free to get in, but you had to pay $10 to leave. I'm like, what?
To leave alive.
The first intermission, there were 3 intermissions. The first intermission was a guy named Tim Slagle dressed up as a Nazi drag queen and smoking a cigarette, not saying a word. And when the cigarette was out, it was like starting the second act. The second intermission was a meat puppet. And it was a love story between a raw chicken and a piece of steak. Oh, wow. And it's like, what's happening here? But we do that show twice a night. So we do the show twice a night. So the show ended, everybody paid their $10 to leave, and then immediately we washed the floor. We had these factory fans blowing on it. We had second costumes. We put our costumes in bleach, and we painted the set, and then did a second show. Talk about a young man's game. There's just no way. So they had a stage like this. So it was off the ground. They had this kind of thing. And when that theater left there, they picked up the stage, and it was 4 inches of gelatin glue, dog hair, and meat. And it was like, wow, that's very cool. That's really cool. That should have been kept for the Smithsonian Institute or something. Yeah. But yeah. It's quite a journey. I've done a lot.
You have done.
And I'm not saying I've done look at me. It's like, what a life.
No, but it's full. You've taken all the experiences and you just kept building on it. So, And your book, I mean, it's been out for about a year, and it's gotten lots of people love your book.
Yeah.
And is there a second edition coming? And would you add? Is there anything that you missed in that you would?
Apparently on
add?
page 312 there's a typo. And I haven't looked at it, but I'm like, I'm fucking not interested in it at all. If I was going to have a second, there probably will be, because I do have other exercises that came from that exercise. Anybody who's written a book, especially if it's a nonfiction book or this kind of a book, the important thing is to not, the moment that you publish it and you put it out, it's in amber. You know, and I do not want this stuff to be prescriptive, and I say it in the book. It's like this is my philosophy. It will change. I will be wrong.
Right.
And what I've been doing is adding more, because this book is just such it's such a primer in what it is that I teach. But there's also these exercises that really help, and I've been teaching these exercises in the book all around the world, and I would come back home and go, well, that didn't work, or we're going to add this. So there's probably 15 more exercises that I've discovered. And it's only because everybody went, this is different. I want to do this. I don't want to suffer. You know, I will say one of the things that people know me now. Because people didn't know me before. I mean, they knew me, but you know, now they know me, and they know me maybe as the angry Buddhist, or I have a reputation. There's somebody sent something. I'd say, did you have this quote? And I'm like, I don't remember that quote. So I Googled my name and that quote, and it didn't come up. But what did come up was a Reddit thread that was titled, "Would someone please explain Dave Razowsky to me?" And I was like, what? No. And it's that moment that you go, what other people think of me is none of my business. I'm going to go in with that. I'm going in with that. And the first thing was, I never, this is so typical, I've never taken a class, but a friend of mine did. And he's angry. He yells at you. He makes you do the scene that he wants you to do. He gets in your face. And someone said, I found it, he gets in your face, and my friend found it very uncomfortable. And I went, Jesus, all of that is right. I do yell at you. But when I yell at you, I want you to have the energy that I'm offering you. And I'm never yelling at you in a mean way. I'm yelling at you like, come on. I get in your face. Yeah, because I want you to feel that energy. You know?
And you want us to think out of the box.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so when you whisper in our ears,
Oh my
we're
God.
doing the workshop, it's like,
right.
I didn't, oh.
Right.
Oh,
So
and
what
you
I'll
get so excited.
What I'll do is I'll stop a scene and I'll whisper in your ear, or I'll have you do this. Come over here. I'll meet you in my office, and I'll say, tell them that, and then you'll tell them that, and it will energize the scene. And that's not about me going how great I am. It's like you didn't think of this. And when I was at Second City, and I did 10 shows there, and I directed 4 shows there, and in addition to being the artistic director, so I was really steeped in improv to create sketch comedy. That my improv teaching is really about how to create sketch comedy in that moment. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
it's like
you're invested. You're invested, and you want us to get the most out of it.
It's that, and it's also, I want you to be mindful of the words that you're using as you would be if you were writing a script. To know that if you offer this, if you end your sentence with this, your partner is going to pick up on this. Is that what you want to end? Do you want to do that scene? Is that the scene that you want to do? And so what I'm doing now is I'm stopping you from saying that, or I'm asking you to say this particular thing in this particular way. And again, not because the most thankless job in any theater is a Second City director, because they are the midwives to the show. They don't get any thanks at all. You could sit in the back of a house, 400 people are laughing at something that somebody says, and you turn to no one and you go, I wrote that line. and no one responds, good job. And they're like, then you and no one go out for drinks later, and no one tells you how great you are. And then you go home with no one. But anyway, now I'm married again. So
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you for my 3-month anniversary tonight. Thank you. And that also goes back to the idea of, Laura Parker is my wife, and she's an opera singer. She teaches something called Alexander Technique. She's really connected. She's really, really funny. She's the funny one in the family. And my first marriage was to somebody that was a great person, but she never made me laugh. And I never felt like, I never felt entertained. And we had bits, but not as many as Laura and I had. And it's like, there's so many bits. And it's like, I just bits. Anyway, move on. So it's about surrounding yourself with the people that take your breath away. It's having people around you that inspire you to be the best you that you can be on stage. Someone that is selfless, because in improvisation, there's the psychological concept called attachment theory, and attachment theory, the way that I just described it, I have a student who turned me on to this. She's a psychotherapist, and she goes, "Oh, you're talking about attachment theory." I'm like, "What's attachment theory?" And she goes, "Just for what you're doing, we see 2 characters on stage, but that's actually one unit. They're attached. So when you're doing an improv scene, it's not 2 characters creating the scene, it's the collaborators that are creating that scene. They are one unit. So I don't do anything without asking myself, do you want us to do that?" And that's a really important part of what it is that we're doing. And there's that sense of playfulness. And I've been really, really lucky. I've been so lucky to have played with some of the greatest, not just improvisers, but actors and writers and directors and teachers, human beings that have really been a part of my journey. It helped me write this book. Yeah.
I've been asking a lot of questions, so I want to bring it out to the audience here to ask David any questions that you might have.
Hi.
I listened to your TED Talk before coming here, and I was wondering if you'd share that idea about next. I thought that was really good.
Oh, was it the idea that you're standing in line somewhere? Was it next?
You told the story of the cave stream and next, and I thought it was...
Oh, the idea that you don't know what's going to happen next, yeah. So we were in, I was working with somebody down in New Zealand, and they said, let's go to this cave stream. And I'm like, what's a cave stream? And they said, why don't you say the word cave stream, and then you'll figure it out. I was like, oh, cave stream. Like, okay, good. And they gave me gear to wear, and they gave me, I hope I'm telling the right story, it's been a while, but they gave me gear to wear, which is like wetsuit, and the glasses, and the gloves, and walking in. And normally, the cave stream is just a walk in the park. But what we didn't know until we got there was it had just rained, and the current of the cave stream was really intense. And they didn't experience that way. And I found myself not being able to move, and I'm like, I can die here. And the only way out is through. The only way out is through. And I'm moving through this stream, and I've got these 2 people that are with me, and the woman who's very strong, she Lara is her name, Lara gets up on this rock and says, "David, grab my hand, grab my hand." And I'm like, I don't have the energy to grab her hand. And I'm thinking, I will die. This is it, I will die. And then I was like, no, just be in this moment. Don't think of what is going to happen next. Be aware of what is happening now. You have somebody standing in front of you, asking you to grab your hand. And the moment that I thought that I was like, just be with this moment right now. Sit in this moment right now. And then Jonathan came back from, I don't know how he got the strength, came to my back, and then lifted me up onto the ground, onto this boulder, and essentially saved my life. Was that the story? Yeah. So it's that idea of you will know what you need to know when you need to know what you need to know. And that was an improv, that was a Buddhist and an improv moment that I really felt like I was going to die. I really felt like I was going to die, and I just kept thinking, oh, Laura's going to be so sad. And then my second thought was, I'll never see my cat again. It wasn't like, what's drowning like? It wasn't that. It was like, I won't see my cat again.
Other questions?
Yeah.
So I was in the exchange that you guys were having earlier around the pregnant pause and sitting with, when you don't know what's happening, sitting with it. It seemed like there was an interesting connection to the naming it that you talked about at the beginning.
Once you define it exists.
Yes. I'd like to understand more about that. Is that because it sounds like the naming it becomes some sort of defining it and just sort of admitting openly and just saying, oh, okay, I don't know what's happening here.
Right.
Is in some way, I don't know, it allows something to happen. What is it allowed to happen in a scene? Or
It grounds you in that moment, and it identifies where it is that you are in that moment.
Yeah.
It grounds you, and it gives you, this is where I am.
Yeah.
This is what's happening right now. Because if you don't identify what it is, then it gets lost, or you have nothing to hold on to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it seems like also there's a bit of an entertainment factor to it too for the audience. Like it provides a point of relief or relation to the audience can say, okay, it's like a fourth wall thing or something.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Well, yeah. There is, for me, there is a feeling of, I don't care about the audience. I really don't. And I teach that. Like, I don't give a fuck about the audience. We already have your money. It doesn't matter. It's also that, and it's like, if you don't know that we're improvising, then you haven't been fucking paying attention. But it's that feeling of, but that doesn't mean that I am not empathizing with the audience. So what I'm doing is, I'm up here, and this is a very Buddhist thing that I kind of felt at Second City, at Improv Olympic, before I got to Second City, was I realized I am me, I am you, I am you, I am the floor. It's nirvana. I am also the audience. And what do I want to see and where do I want this to go? And it's also, when I'm putting myself in the audience, I don't know if this is what you're talking about, when I'm putting myself in the audience, I'm not putting myself in an audience of people who have expectations, who are going to be upset if I don't do what it is that they want to do. It's an improv show. You know, it's not you going to see...
Macbeth.
What?
Macbeth.
Macbeth. It's not me doing that. But it's that feeling of like, let's do this. Let's see what the hell happens.
And I guess that's what I sort of mean, and why it's awesome for the audience then, because then they're in the scene.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember doing a show with the great Rachel Hamilton, and it was when Rachel and I worked together. There was no audience. It was just this thing where the audience would be watching it and going, "Oh my God, I shouldn't be watching this," and not because it was dirty. It was like, "Oh, the way they're talking to each other," and it was just she's just a warm, wonderful fucking human being, and we connected in this way. And I remember doing a scene at the San Francisco Improv Festival. I don't know if anybody was at that show, and it started out with, the scene was I hosted a birthday party for a new woman who was moving into this community that we were in. And the scene starts out with her going, "I'm so sorry," and it was just that feeling at the moment of saying, "I'm so sorry," because it looked like, my first line, I looked at Rachel and it looked like she was upset. It's like, "It's all right, it's okay, don't worry about it," because I'm so sorry, right? Because she looked that way. We did not take a suggestion. And it's like, and it turned out that, so one of the lines was like, "I shouldn't have said that," and it's like, "I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have said that." It's like, all right, and I'm thinking to myself, what is it that she's so upset about that I could just blow off? And I was like, it's all right, people call people kikes all the time. Now, kike is the Jewish N-word, you know, in a very different way. But it was like, I didn't mean to say it, and then she goes, if it's any consolation, I have a friend who I call Cunty, and I'm like, I don't even want to know what that's about. And the scene went on, and then after the scene, a guy, I don't know what he was doing there, in a yarmulke, runs up to Rachel and says, "How dare you call him that? How dare you call him that?" And Rachel was like, blah, blah, blah. And she went, well, in an improv scene, you never know what's going to happen. And she relayed this story to me, and I was like, you didn't say that. I said that. And you just agreed to that. And that is the magic trick that great improvisation does for an audience member. And if you've ever seen really great improv, you remember a particular scene, and what you remember about that scene is, if it's a scene that you really fall into, you remember what the actors were wearing. You remember what the set was. You remember what the props were. You remember what the costumes were. You remember what the music was. Well, let me tell you, Buster, none of those things were there. You imprinted those things because you were able to suspend your disbelief, because the actors were in charge on that scene. They didn't give a fuck what you were doing. It looked like it was written, you're welcome. And it was like, that's the magic. So that's what I want to do with an audience. And my point with talking about Laura was, you have to find somebody that will do that with you. You have to find somebody that will do that with you. And if you don't work with them. If you can't, don't work with them. My dad once said, you can't change the color of a person's eyes. And I was like, that's really true. And everybody is on a different journey. But it's not like, oh, you know what? You got to work with Sid because there aren't any more improvisers in the world. It's like, no. And the only mistake you make in sex and improv is casting. It's like, that's it. And it's bad touch. Fucking don't. Just wait. Because there's nothing worse than being up on stage with somebody who isn't paying attention to you. To y'all. Like, who has their own agenda.
Other questions?
Yeah.
So the book came out like a year and a half ago or so, and you've been here a year ago. How do you feel like? Do you feel like your process has changed at all? Do you feel like you're seeing a different type of student coming to you, maybe, or like what's different?
Right. Great question.
Yeah.
People know who I am, and so they're coming in informed because I have a calling card. I have a book. And so they're coming in, and there's a step that's missing. There's a step that I don't have to do because they understand it. And if they don't, that's fine, because every class that I have, everybody starts at the same zero. It's not, I do have certain classes that I call grad classes, but there's people that I've worked with a lot. So people are coming in with a little more information. It's blowing me the fuck away when they start using phrases that I, as far as I know, that aren't taught anywhere but in this book. And I was in Zurich. If you're really excited and you can't sleep, go to Zurich. They'll cure you. But there's a group of people and improvisers there that are fucking fantastic. And I've never worked with them. I don't know who they are. All that I know is I did an hour and a half show, and they were using all of my methodology in that. So this is another thing that's happened since then. Is this true? Yeah. Fewer people are leaving my class in the middle of class. Fewer people are leaving my class. I used to have at least, I'd be on the road 200 days out of the year teaching, and I would have 3 people leave my class, which is a lot too many. And it was like, because they felt like I was getting in their face, because they didn't know who I was. And people go, you got to calm down. It's like, don't fucking tell me to calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. Right. Yeah. Don't tell me to calm down, because this is what I want. I want people to come in here and to realize that you're dealing with a different teacher. I'm not saying a better teacher. I'm saying it's a different teacher who has a different approach. And my approach is it's the best description I can. It's like Jewish Yenta improv teacher. Like, do you really want to say that? Is that what you want? You're not gonna finish that? You finish that beat. And I don't need EET, B-E-E-T. It's like, you finish that beat. So fewer people are leaving. That's not to say some don't. I had a woman in Liverpool a few months ago who left, and I was like, wait. And this is what has to happen. When people get up and go, I'm like, at first it was like, I'm leaving. It's like, then they're gone. I'm like, I need to have them talk to me about why they're leaving. If I did something that caused you to leave, if you leave and don't tell me, neither of us are getting anything out of this experience that we're having. And so people go like, grab this stuff, like, don't you go until you tell me why you're leaving, and then you can go. And they would tell me. And this woman, she wasn't angry. She was just like, I didn't come to have a master's class in improvisation. And I'm like, okay. Okay. I just want to have fun. It's like, okay. Okay. I am not a good teacher of children. Do not, no, no, right, no. But you got to know what it is that you teach, right? And when you have a book, and again, the book, Uta Hagen wrote 2 books on, on her methodology. She wrote this first book, and then she wrote the second book, which started out essentially with this: my first book was bullshit. So I'm doing this second book. And it's like, that's it, that's great. And the methodology does change. And what I'm doing is I'm reading a lot of, because I have a class an ongoing class called How Do I Work With That? And it's somebody who, it's just a list of 20 things where people throw this shit at you at the beginning of scenes, like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that? And those things need to be tweaked a little bit. But there are certain things in there that I've never worked on. Like when I'm teaching that list, there's one that is, so one is like the characters are too large, or they won't let go of their point of view, or they're too hot, whatever. But another one is, how do you deal with somebody that's a misogynist, bigot, racist? And that's a real tough one. That's a real tough one, because you have to bring in, or I would just have people read that. I kept trying to do that exercise. I won't take it out, but I can't have one actor playing that part and have the other actor be in relationship to that without bringing the architecture of hate into the space. And nobody wants to use those words. I mean, I'll say kike because Rachel's Jewish. But if Rachel wasn't Jewish, I don't know that I would say that. And this is kind of the same way. Does that make sense? Yeah. But it's intense, especially now. Mm-hmm. And what I mean now is like, so close to Thanksgiving. So soon after Halloween. But it's cool to write a book. It's really cool to write a book, and I forget that I read a book, and people go, well, what'd you do? And I'm like, what have you been doing? And I'm like, I do this, this, and this, and someone goes, and you wrote a book. It's like, oh yeah, I wrote a book. I wrote a book. And here's the cool thing about the book is, look how big the font is. More books should do that. My cousin's a well-known astronomer. His name is Phil Plait, and he wrote, he's got something called the Badass Astronomer. He does it, whatever. And he wrote this book, and the font is so fucking small, and it's not on Kindle, so it's like, I can't read your book, Phil. He's devastated.
There are other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had a similar experience last year, where
To what?
N-word came to.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
So, and I remember we did that scene, and it was not great for me. But I said, what does your book say? And he said that when that happens, you have to just address it, but I did not know if it's addressing it in the moment of the scene or you're breaking character.
The first choice for me is in character, because here's the thing. This is another thing. You will know what you need to know. You need to know. I cannot wait to find out what my character didn't know. Right? So this goes along that way, where it's like your character is not written in stone. Your character changes with any kind of big moments that happen in the scene. So you're not breaking character, you're showing a different facet of that character. So somebody uses the N-word, or somebody is misogynistic, or anything like that within that unbelievably heavy set of words. It's like you get to call out what you're feeling in that moment. And what you do then is, and I know I said I didn't care about the audience, But this is one of those opportunities where it's like, the audience needs to know that I'm in charge. The audience needs to know that I have this. Because if I don't, we don't have a moment that people have never seen in theater before. Are you following me on that? Do you know what I mean?
I am.
So let me just have an example. Like, so the example for me, and I think it's also in this book, is like, oh, Bob, you don't have to talk to me that way. We're having this great conversation, and then you say something, and it breaks my heart. So at that moment, you've taken care of what you're actually feeling, and as hard as it's going to be, because it's that knee-jerk reaction of going, or.
That's the knee-jerk reaction I'm trying to figure out, because, you know, when you're doing this scene, it's a very, like, there's a back voice in me still. Like, I still have the ego in me, and it's saying, oh shit, that's a sandwich word.
Yeah.
It's not a sandwich word, it's the sandwich word.
It's a sandwich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, but still, it's like.
Well, I don't. Forgive me for cutting you off. Improvisation, no improv. There is no good improv where knee-jerk reactions work. You can't have a knee-jerk reaction. You've got to be mindful to something that just happened in that moment, aware of what happens, and to have that. There's a liminal space. So the liminal space is this. So somebody tells a story about, I was driving down the street, having a great day, it was great, I was listening to and the music was great, and then somebody cut me off, and I immediately opened my window, yelled at them, and gave them the finger. Like, here's the thing. The part of that isn't true is immediately I went and did that. You made a decision, but you made a mindless decision in that moment. There's that liminal space. The liminal space is a space in between two actions that happen or two emotions. For me, I feel like it's a major part of all improvisation. Something happens, and at that moment, you go, oh, it's the end of something. I'm about to begin something, but there's that area there that's between those two things. That's a real space. And you get to sit in it and go, what kind of scene do I want to have? What's my truth right now? You hurt my feelings. You said that. And if you want, you can also go, Clark, I can't do the scene anymore. Okay? That's always your ace in the hole. But my first feeling is to go, I'm going to call it out. And then backstage say this, we're done. You and I are done. Because if it's like any other theater here, a director does not have the balls or the ovaries to tell somebody that was egregious. Not enough improv teachers, coaches, no, they're teachers, will give somebody a hard note. And that hard note that they're giving that person also says to everybody else, I got you.
Well, the hard note was given to me.
Say it again.
The hard note was given to me.
Say that one more time.
The hard note was given to me.
Yeah, that's not right. That's not fair. That's wrong. Because you're not the perpetrator. You're the, excuse the expression, the victim.
Fuck your victimhood.
What's that?
Fuck your victimhood.
Well, but you know what I'm saying? I don't know what other word to say. But forgive me. I didn't know another word to say at that moment, and it's the wrong word.
Focus, maybe? I did the focus, I don't know.
But whatever it's going to be, yeah. But again, it's like whoever was the director at that moment didn't carry it right. Is that fair to say? I mean, I wasn't there, but
We were brand new and we're having fun.
okay, great. But again, if you got somebody directing you or coaching you, you got to set up parameters of what you can and cannot say. Because you can say that if you all give yourself permission to say that. You can get away with it if you know how to do it. But you got to know how to do it.
And you have to know who you're playing with.
And and the audience has to know
Yeah.
that that's what you're doing too.
Right.
Because if they don't, it's like, what is going
Yeah.
on?
Then they feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can tell people in splatter theater audiences that this is all make them up, they're like, someone needs to call the police.
Yeah.
There are 13 people murdered on stage. And why are we being charged to leave? But yeah. Cool.
Any other questions?
Anything else? Yeah.
you were saying, you had made a comment about how when people throw out name, place, it kind of sets up a convention and you sort of understand already so much about the scene that doesn't allow it to unfold. But in the other case, when you're accepting of the moment and you're in the moment, does that lead to a certain set of conventions, a certain set of cliches that start cropping up around that way of entering a scene too?
It could. No. I'm thinking, because I'm going to say a conditional no. Because most of the scenes that we're doing when we start out a scene with like, you got to calm down, everything's going to be okay, takes us in a very different way. And then what we get to do later on is to go, who is this person? Now let's define who they are. Let's not define it at the beginning. Let's just see what's the emotional content in that moment, and then we'll define it later. I'll give you an example. I think we should go. Two people's like, I think we should go. We can't go. We gotta hang out here. It's like, I'm just feeling really uncomfortable. I think we should leave. It's like, no, we can't leave. We've got to be here for a bit. It's like, no, I don't want to be here anymore. I just got to get the fuck out of here. It's like, you can't get out of here unless I get out of here with you. It's like, then let's go. It's like, we can't go. Well, where are they? Where do you think they are? Typically, where would you think they were? At a party. They're in the womb. They're in prison. So if we start out with the emotional connection, then we get to pull the rug out from under us and go, where shouldn't this scene be? And then that's where it is. So the answer to where is it that we are, the answer to the question where is it that we are is another question, and that question is where shouldn't it be? Based upon the inventory that we've been talking about. Where shouldn't, and because we don't have a prop, and because we don't have sets, and because we don't have prop sets, costumes, we can be anywhere. An improv scene is closer to a dream than it is to a work of fiction, because you can make anything happen at any moment at all. And when you and I are in a scene together, we're doing this amazing thing called creating a dream. And just like a dream, when it's over, it's over. And then you feel like it happened. Because theatrical improvisation is the greatest existential experience that I know of. Because it's you, but it's not you. It's your partner, but it's not your partner. It's your house, but it's not your house. It's like all these things. And then when you're done, just like in a dream, you go, oh my God, what just happened? Or oh my God, what just happened? And it's like, in a dream, it's like you made out with your third grade teacher, or you made out with your landlord, whatever that's going to be. And then later on you see your landlord's like, oh, she's going to remember. Like, no! That's how cool the dream was. And the cool thing about a dream is there's not like, all right, everybody, we just had this dream. Everybody get together. Look, I got some notes. Next time we do this dream, you can't be a butterfly and the Mayflower. It just can't be. It's like, you don't get a second that. So what does that mean we have to do? We've got to be present and aware and mindful to what it is that we're doing so that we can pull this down into and make it feel like it's authentic. Because most improvisers that I see, they have this voice that is like, I don't know what you are. It seems like you're a reject from the Alexa or Siri school of talking to each other. Because it's like, I don't know. It's like, hey, Carl, don't you think maybe we should go out to prom together and have a good time? It's like, who the fuck talks that way? And when you have somebody where it's like, like get the suggestion, where are they? All right, here we go. Where are they? All right, they're at an ice cream store. Okay, great. It's like, okay. And the first line is inevitably something having to do with ice cream. What's the one thing we know? They're at an ice cream store. What's the one thing we don't have to talk about? They're at an ice cream store. Everybody in the room knows we're at an ice cream store. So the moment you go, we're at an ice cream store, my first line is like, all right, if you're not going to talk to me, then let's not be connected anymore. So now we're having this awesome conversation in an ice cream store. Instead of like, that rocky road wasn't so rocky. A joke. It's like, fuck your joke. Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment is a Rumi quote. And it's just such a great quote. It'd also be a really good gum flavor. Bewilderment. Spearmint.
Say the whole quote again.
Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment. Because there's that feeling of like, oh, I gotta be clever. The moment that you're clever in a scene, you take yourself out of the scene because you're doing this for a goal. What's your goal? Your goal is to get a laugh. But the product of improvisation is the process of improvising. We're watching two people struggle through this experience that they're having in that moment. And if every scene is Happy Puppy Loves Kitty Town and everything fucking works out, it's like, it's like children's theater. And nobody wants to watch children's theater. Not even children want to watch children's theater. It's like, I spent $14 to get in here. It was $25 to park the car. I went out for dinner. We had a babysitter. It's like, this is a $250 evening to watch you do, I don't know, fairy tales that aren't even in the original German. So they're really boring. As opposed to they really live in a piss pot. It's a pot of piss and they live there. Those fairy tales, the Grimm tales, are really grim. Really, really good. When I was in Geese Company, we lived on a 51-foot school, 51-foot 1963 International Harvest, so 3-speed school bus. And the director, John Bergman, he knew this woman who lived in Arden, Delaware, in this little community in a cottage that was essentially like a fairy tale cottage. And she would go around the world translating Grimm's fairy tales from the original German. And it is intense. It is intense. My God, that was a great experience. Yeah.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. One of my favorite lines, I've just started the book, I haven't finished it yet, but one of my favorite lines is when, and I wanted this, leading to a question, is about the bus. And you say, now imagine a rock star bus, and it's got the satellite dish in the kitchen. Now stop imagining that, because that's not the kind of bus that we had.
That's not a bus at all. That wasn't a bus.
I love that moment as a reader, and I wondered how you applied improvisation to writing. Were there were moments in there where you sort of just were having fun with the flow?
I love that question, especially that section, because when I was writing the book, the memoir portion, I did not realize how much I got out of Geese Company. I did not realize how profoundly, and I get really choked up about it, how profoundly that changed my life, and it gave me a direction that I would never go in. And so if I was looking at it, my editor was like, don't be so flowery, you don't have to say that, nobody cares about the coach bus and all that. She wanted me to take that particular part out, and I was like, no, this is it, because when you say, I want you to know what we went through. And what we went through there was, we lived in this shithole bus, and there was nothing good about it at all. It had no heat. Nothing. None. I drove that bus. I've never been in Manhattan before, and we were going to Rikers Island. I don't know if you know what Rikers Island is. Rikers Island is like, geez, what? It's like, what? And I rode that bus, that 51-foot school bus, on a Wednesday morning at 9:30 through the streets of Manhattan. I was 25. Wow. I had never ridden a bus before. I'd never driven a 3-speed before. I drove it doesn't matter. But it's like, what an experience. And I could go deeper into that too. And it was great because it's like this feeling like, I remember that. I remember that feeling. I remember how exciting it was. And I also remember how depressing it was on so many different levels. One that I didn't talk about in the book is nobody sees you. The people that watch you aren't going to go, you got to go see this show when it comes to your prison. Nobody's talking about that. But so everything that you're doing is about the ensemble, is about the group, it's about learning, it was just intense. And to go from there to Chicago theater, improvisation in Chicago, I felt like nobody knew, I was doing something different that nobody else was doing. It's like, all right, that's okay. And somehow I just was in it with a bunch of people who were also going, we're pretending that we know what's going on, but we don't. Yeah. Really good experience.
Any other questions? Should we wrap it up?
Who has read the book? Good, it's on. Okay, or reading it. Because I don't have the opportunity to ask this very often, but how has it been helping you? You know what I mean? Like, for those of you who, one of the things about the book that I really want to make sure is you didn't need to be an improviser to get something out of this. It's that. So there's that aspect. And some people who are really into the methodology or the Buddhist part of it is like they're getting this out. But what are you getting out of the book? And it could be something like it's good font, or that's a good size of the font, or what's going on page 312. Something's going on page 312. I'm gonna tell you, and I just don't want to look. I'm like, I can't look. Anything? Yeah.
Sometimes we go down with people who don't know about improv, and sometimes it's sort of like grocery shop listing and things like that, and inventory. And I just realized, like, even though there could be inventory, you can find an emotion and a feeling, and then you can work on that feeling. And sometimes when it's sort of like, I brought my puppy along, its name is Sparky, our Sparky, and it's like, oh, Sparky's a common name.
Right.
Common name.
Right.
It's a very, very, very common name.
Right. Yeah.
Don't call it a common name, you son of a bitch. I'm not a son of a bitch, you're a cunt.
Right.
And then it
There's a
comes off
scene.
in different scenes. So
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's like help me work with people who I don't necessarily know and don't know.
That don't.
It's, they're throwing new stuff at me and they're beginners and I can still see it.
That's great, and that's what this "How do I work with that" class is all about. It's like, how do you work with somebody that doesn't know what they're doing?
The
It's like,
sister bridge lines are just great. I tell
Yeah.
people who try to do sister lines and bridge lines.
yeah,
Repeat the same thing. back
yeah.
and forth.
And it's all about repeating. It's all about making that connection, making sure that I know what you know and you know what I know. If you do something, say you wave your hand, I know. If I said I wave my hand, like I know I wave my hand. I know that you know that I wave my hand. I know that you know that I know that I wave my hand. I know that you know that I know that you know that I wave my hand. And when you work on that type of noticing, defining it, nothing gets by you. Because both of you are learning something at the same fucking time.
Yes.
And the newbies, they'll get it or they won't get it. And that's fine. Everybody's on their own journey. But to know that common name, you're like, oh, that's my point of view. So I'm going to grab onto that common name thing. And it gives me something, it gives you something to do while they're flying all over the place.
Yes. And that's my most, I'm grateful for that because I still have this horror moment when someone told me, John Wayne, and they expected me to go, I'm John Wayne. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's just changed a lot.
I had a student from, we would do something in when I was the artistic director at Second City, LA, and this is a true story. Second City, LA, we would do something called the Immersion Workshop. And the Immersion Workshop was twice a year, and people would come from all over the world to work a week at Second City of teaching. And this one woman, she was from Florida. And I have this, we were taking suggestions at the time, and I was like, what are these two people's occupation? And someone went, cowboy. And I went, you're two cowboys. And she stopped, she goes, what's a cowboy? And I went, so here's the answer to the question, what's a cowboy? Like, what's a cowboy? A cowboy. That's the answer to the cowboy, dilemma. Like, what is a cowboy? A cowboy. I don't know how to answer it other than a cowboy. Because a cowboy isn't a boy that's a cow. It's not a cow that's a boy. It's a cowboy. That's what it is. And someone went, yeah, they ride horses and then they I don't know, get cows. And it's like, I don't know what that is. And she's like, well, John Wayne. And she went, I don't know who that is. And if I didn't know what a cowboy was, I'm not going to know who John Wayne is. Like, well, John Wayne did other movies, but I'm not going to talk to you about that. But she came to a point where she was like, she started crying. Like, she did not know what a cowboy was. And I'm like, all right, good, you're plumbers. I hope you know what a plumber is. I hope you know what a plumber is. But I don't know why I'm telling that story, because you said John Wayne, which made me think of that. Also this. Everybody's coming. The important thing for an improv teacher, for me, is meet people where they are. You've got to meet them where they are. You've got to meet them emotionally where they are, and you've got to meet them just where they are. And I talk about in the book where I was teaching a class. This guy, one of my mentors, Michael Gelman, was teaching a class. This guy, Gary Austin, who was the founder of the Groundlings, we were all at this place teaching a class, and we worked with everybody in the afternoon to teach a specific form. And then we were doing a show for everybody that night, and my form was we worked all the time, and everybody got it, and then when it's showtime, they fucking forgot that we ever did anything. And it was like I don't know, cats on Ritalin. I don't know, something was happening, and I had no idea what was going on. And I'm like so angry. And then Michael Gelman's group comes up, and his group is like, you know, I know that he worked with them all the time, and they fucked up, and Gelman's like, ha ha, ha ha ha. And I was like, oh, what's happening? And later on, I was like, Gelman, they didn't do anything. It drives me crazy. How can you not be driven crazy? And he said this, and it was like so cool. And he doesn't remember it, but I know he did it. He said this. He was like, "This is the learning curve of every actor that I work with. This is the learning curve." And he goes, "I'm responsible for that much." And I was like, that changed everything. Because like, I'm just responsible for meeting you where you are, and if you get something out of it, you do, and if you don't, that's okay. You'll get it later, or you'll get it never. But all I know is, I met you where you were. You know, this stuff isn't easy.
I was just gonna say, that's just, meet where they are, you can take that outside.
Right.
You know, it's learning getting to know someone and knowing, I mean, especially now.
Right.
It's like, meet them where they are and see where that.
Meet them where they are,
Yeah.
and then don't try to take them anywhere
Right,
else.
right.
Yeah, yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
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 Laura and I were in Paris. She came to visit me when I was in Europe teaching, and she came in. We had what I call my accidental honeymoon, which is like, we didn't expect Paris to be so romantic. What were we thinking? And we went to this one restaurant, and it was a really cute little restaurant in the Marais, and they put us all the way in the back. We had reservations. They walked us all the way in the back, and I was like, what? And then they walked another couple all the way in the back, and then another couple all the way in the back, and I was like, what's happening? And I'm listening. It's like, oh, this is the American section. And so we're sitting there, and the couple that was next to us, they're like, where are you from? And it's an older couple, and they're like, oh, we're from Montana. And both Laura and I were going, okay, you're from Montana? Great. And it's like, oh, what city? Small little city in Montana. Like, I don't know. What are we going to talk to these people about? And the most important thing is, what aren't we going to talk to these people about? And then they just opened up about, are you scared about thee? And I'm like, yeah, we're scared about thee. And it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know who we were talking about. I didn't know who we were talking to either. And then it was like, oh, you're the liberals. You're the liberals of Montana. But it was one of those things, like, you never know, you don't know, and you meet them where they are, and they give you more, you take more. Good. Anything else about reading the book? And then I'll just wrap it up from that what you're getting at. Yeah.
So much. But I think for me, one of the most powerful things that I've taken, not just in classes or in theater, but in everything, dare to be lovely.
Dare to be lovely.
Making the choice, like willfully choosing the kinder option has made such a difference in every aspect of my life.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's
Really hard.
so hard. It's like you were saying, like the knee-jerk reactions. It's so hard not to just like want to give somebody the back of your hand sometimes, but like taking that moment and recognizing, well, I could go this way, or
Yeah.
I could go this way. And this is actually more interesting for all of us, including me, even though I don't want to admit it at this moment,
Right.
because it continues the conversation.
And what it also does, where the audience expects you to flare.
Yeah.
And when you don't flare, it's like, oh, there's a scene I didn't see. And then both of you are off balance. And if both of you are off balance, you're totally in balance. Because balance is off balance in what we're doing. If it's in balance, like nobody wants to watch that.
Being interesting by being interested.
If you want to be interesting, be interested. And that's another thing that was like, oh my God, you know, Del, I remember Del saying that. And Del said that, you know, his acting colleague Elaine May turned him on to it. It's like, Elaine May, But anyway, it's Dare to Be Lovely. And the Dare to Be Lovely thing, again, is like somebody goes like, Jerry, you're late. It's like, who woke up on the wrong side? You're 5 minutes late. It's like, oh, I'm 5 minutes late. That's 5 minutes that we didn't get to hang out with each other. You know, and then you're doing a scene that you've never seen, but you've got to be conscious of it, and you've got to know, do you want to do this scene? And it's a flow chart. And if you do improvisation long enough, you become clairvoyant. And what I mean by that is you go, if I make this decision, this scene will go in this direction. I know it's going to go in that direction. And how do you know? Because whatever line I'm going to have right now, if it's going to be something that my partner doesn't know about, if I'm going to say that, I better have the bandwidth and we better have the audience's attention to be able to explain it. And if we don't, what's a line that I could say that can immediately connect us? And it's usually, what are you feeling right now? What's the feeling you're feeling right now? And it's important for you to define what that feeling is at that moment and to be able to express yourself in that way. Really, really vital. Yeah, I love Dare to Be Lovely. It's really fun. It's really, really fun. But these are all things that people aren't teaching in most classes. And you know, I vowed not to get down on any other schools, but I always break that. But I think what happens is most people don't want to do improvisation because there's the expectation that you have to be clever, you have to be funny, you've got to be entertaining. And for me, it's like, in most of the people that are in my classes, I teach 4 classes online, beginners and whatever. It's like the misbegotten toys. What's the phrase? What?
Misfit toys.
The misfit toys. It's like an island of misfit toys. It's like everybody doesn't belong there, and so we all belong together, and we're doing this thing because nobody wants to be the guy, you know? And because I've had enough of the guy, and they don't last. They don't last. I look at the cast that I had at Second City, where it's like, all those people are funny, but they will not tell you a joke, because they don't know jokes. They know honesty and vulnerability, and they know connection, and that's what makes them funny. My cast was Steve Carell, Stephen Colbert, Amy Sedaris, Paul Dinello, Scott Adsit, like Rachel Dratch, like all these people, and it's like, they're not funny, jokey funny. They're funny because they say things that they shouldn't say, but they're not non sequiturs. They shouldn't say it because we don't say this in polite company. The stuff that Amy would do backstage is like, don't show that to anybody. She had this yellow jumpsuit, and she would grab the phone book, the Chicago phone book, and she played a character called Shove This Up My Ass. I was like, what's your name? My name. Shove this up my ass. That phone, shove it up my ass. That couch, shove it up my ass. Like, oh God. But that was backstage.
So, go ahead.
I was scratching myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm interested in the contrast that you seem to be making between being in the moment, responding to whatever's coming up, what you're feeling, and then this other way you're talking about it, about being very conscious about where the scene's going to go, the options that are possible, and how you're going to direct the course. How do these things come together when they seem, one seems very, understood and projecting and conscious, and the other one's spontaneous, responsive in the moment?
They're both the same. So again, I go back to that attachment theory, where both of us know what it is that we're doing in that moment. And both of us, if I, for some people I know, if I say this line, that scene will go in this particular direction. And I want it to go in this direction. If I say this other line, I have a feeling that we're going to go in this other direction. It's not pre-planned, it's more like their emotional content or the dynamic that we have in that moment. But everything is in the moment at the moment. And the spontaneity comes in where, it's a good question because it makes me think about what does the word spontaneity mean. But in improvisation, spontaneity is a planned thing in a way. And I'm just realizing it. Maybe I'm just talking out of my ass now that there's no phone book up there. But it's like, because it's not, there's nothing that I do. Well, there's two things. Nothing comes out of my mouth that first hasn't been dipped in my heart. And what that means is I'm listening to it, I'm feeling it, and that feeling then turns into words that I want my partner to envelop with us and do this particular scene. But it's not spontaneous. There's one thing, hold that thought. There's a phrase in a lot of improv teaching, and the phrase is, I just had it. Spontaneous. It went away. Hold on. Take care of your partner. I can't remember it, but you had another question. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna. Now I'm caught off guard. I don't remember.
Look what we did to each other. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Maybe we'll take a moment to go, what the fuck were you going to tell each other? The most important person on stage is your partner. That's what people say. The most important person on stage is your partner. Bullshit. The most important person on stage is you. You're the most important person on stage because you are ultimately the one that you have to consult before any words come out of your mouth. You say something, the most important person on stage is my partner, then I'm going to surrender my, whatever it is that I'm feeling, to make you the most important person on stage. The most important person on stage is me. And that's not to say that the scene needs to be about me, but I do not say anything that hasn't been thought about, felt, intentional. Intentionality makes great improvisation. There's a finessing that's going on. It's surgical. And I get so excited because I will have somebody say something, or I will hear somebody say something, and I'll go, that was the best thing that you could have said in that moment because it opened it up, or it solidified something, or it grounded something, or it took it in a way that I wouldn't have taken it. And I'm asking my students to do things like, what if there were no such thing as a metaphor? And you're in a scene, it's like, well, cat's out of the bag. It's like, we were just talking about dinner. You better get the cat and put it back in the bag, because I'm hungry. It's like, oh, I'm so hungry I can eat a horse. It's like, it's 9 o'clock on a Sunday? What horse stores are going to be open? And it's like, to listen to everything that somebody is saying and not to make this assumption of what they meant. Make no assumption, or make an assumption that they meant that. So there's dichotomies all over the place, and I talk about it in the books. Like, I will contradict myself throughout this book. And I will contradict myself throughout this book because, and when I'm teaching, I'll say this to these people, and then I'll do a scene, I'll say this to these people, and somebody in that scene said, well, you said that when I did that, why didn't you say that when I did that? It's like every relationship, I come at every relationship different. I'm not going to treat you in my life the same way that I treat my brother or my sister. So the cool thing about the improv that we're doing is it's human, it's authentic, and so that's a different relationship that I have with that person than with that character, with that situation, than with you. So there's that. Did you remember?
Yeah, I remember.
I knew if I talked about it. That was the only reason I told that last part of the story.
It's was the converse question, which is if you find yourself saying something quote unquote spontaneously without having considered where this is going, and only finding out where it's going after you've already said it, are you doing it wrong? No. But
it's a really good question. I wouldn't do that with somebody I didn't know well. Or I would do that with somebody that I didn't know well at the beginning of the scene, because then it's a diagnostic. So I will say things at the beginning of a scene just to go, I want to see what my partner says about it. I don't know how they work, and if I say this thing, their reaction will tell me how I should play the rest of the scene with them. But it's a diagnostic, and it's what we do all the time, where you'll say something, it's like, how are these people going to take it? And then you push it, and then you push it, and then you push it, and then you're married. Anything else? Yeah.
Does it get lonely at the top? I mean, how do you deal with how
It's a really good question. It's a really good question. And it's a really good question because I can't play with anybody anymore. I have a really hard time playing with people, and the question is really good. My friend Jill Bernard, she was on my podcast, ADD Comedy with Razowsky, which is it's a really good podcast. And Jill was on it, and we were talking about, I said, Jill, nobody ever gives me notes. And I was like, I bet nobody gives you notes because she was running a theater in Minnesota and I'm on the road all the time. And she went, yeah, I guess. And then I did the Carrie Clifford and I did the Detroit Improv Festival show there. And then after the show, Jill Bernard pulls me over and she has notes. And I'm like, oh, you fucker. And then she started giving me notes like, you didn't listen to her at that moment. I want to go, but. And she's like, nope, you didn't listen. And over here, she had an idea and you just totally walked by. It's like, but. But it's the experience that I'm experiencing now is I have nobody to play with, you know, and so I play with my students, and that's really great. But I don't have other people that I play with anymore. Rachel Hamilton. I haven't talked to her in a long time, but she was a great partner, and we don't things happen, but I miss it. And I'm not part of the improv community in LA because Second City's gone, Improv Olympics gone. I never felt connected to a particular theater. I won't say the name, but I'll give you the initials, UCB. I never felt particularly connected to those people. It's no surprise, but nothing happened. It's just like I didn't grok what they were doing, or the groundlings who would periodically ask me to play with them. But I miss it. And I know that I can play with people. But when I play with people, I can't be upset that only 9 people are in the audience to watch it. It's like, that's fine. But I love your question. It's a really, really good question. It's a really good question. I love it.
Are you patiently waiting to be re-met?
No, I've got too much to do, you know, and I do miss it. And when I see people performing, I'm like, oh, you know, with other groups, you know, I take a moment to be sad about it. It's like, why didn't they ask me? And it's like, I don't know, they didn't ask me, you know? And the important thing is not to go down that rabbit hole, you know? I could think to myself, well, they're not asking me because I'm a loose cannon and you never know what I'm gonna do. Or it's like, which is the same, it's like, they're not asking me because I'm just too good. Like, both those are lies. So it's like, they just didn't get around to asking me, you know? But yeah, I love that question. I love talking about it. Anything else? That was really good.
I do want to say one thing. I want to say that whether you have improv experience or no experience at all, and you don't even know what it is, you can take your workshop.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll get something out of it. You don't, and I know from talking to people, like actors are really scared about taking improv.
Right.
And it's like actors could really benefit from taking improv, but I think it's just what you said. When you're doing improv, you have to be vulnerable.
Right.
And you don't have a script to hide behind.
No.
So I encourage those of you who have never done improv to take this workshop.
Yeah.
If you have you've done improv and you haven't read his book, take his workshop. There's 3 spots
That's right.
left.
That's right.
So, you know, it starts tomorrow. You'll get something out of it, whether you use it in your theater work or whether you use it in your outside life. You have to do things that scare you in order to be able to become more authentic.
Absolutely.
And to be more in touch with your
And, you know, and like everybody comes in improv going, you know, it's certainly when I was running Second City, people would come in and go, my agent told me to do this. It's like, all right, well, we get you. And then afterwards, they have friends for life. They have a mate, they've got roommates, they've got jobs, they've got all these things because they've entered into community and they thought that it was only this that they were getting out of it. But it's really important to go.
Such a loving, supportive community.
It really is. It really is. And the workshops here are especially good. I've got 4 books that I brought with me that I don't really want to bring back to Los Angeles. So if you're interested in having it yourself for some ducats, you can, and I will sign it. But I love it.
And I also want to say that Pan Theater has an Improv 101 class on Tuesday, starting this Tuesday. And Jeff started, we have a 201 class that started this Wednesday, and it's not too late to join.
That's right.
Great teacher.
So,
Really great. Anything else?
thank you.